stop worrying, quit being so negative, everything will be fine, right? How many times have you actually heard something like this while you're going through a difficult time? It's like one of the last things you want to hear.
Yeah, those responses are often well-intentioned, of course, but they can be dismissive of someone's struggles.
And there's actually a name for it. It's called toxic positivity. It's essentially when you respond to someone's concerns with false reassurance instead of empathy and validation.
Gosh, yeah, all we need is a little empathy. So joining us now to talk about this, right, how you can show those kinds of emotions and how this can really impact your mental health is Dr. Thea Gallagher, clinical psychologist with NYU Langone. So Dr. Gallagher, thanks for being here this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess the first question is, right, that seems to be the easy go-to response, right? If someone tells you something and it might take a second for someone to form what they're trying to say, and so they're, oh, everything is going to be fine.
Yeah, and I think that what happens is that people don't want to make you feel worse. So they think if I say something nice, that'll keep you from feeling worse. And actually, unfortunately, it usually makes people feel worse in the long run. Even like thinking about people who are struggling with grief. Sometimes you want to say something like, oh, they're in a better place, or, you know, they're in heaven right now. But it kind of dismisses how someone's feeling in the moment, and it does exactly the opposite what you want it to do. But many of us are afraid of some of those negative feelings like sadness and grief and anger. And so it's important to try to interact with them more instead of shy away from them.
So can we go through some examples then? Like responses that are dismissive versus responses that are validating. What can we say instead?
Right. So I think when someone says something like, you know, stop worrying, just be positive, you know, that sounds really tough. I'm here for you. And is there anything I can do to help? And I think sometimes we don't even realize just putting that out there, anything I can do, can really make someone feel comforted, but not, you know, dismissed. And then, you know, being negative won't help you. Just to kind of say something, it's important to express how you feel. Negative and positive emotions are, you know, all part of our humanity. That's why people love that movie Inside Out, right? It talks about the whole spectrum of emotions. And then, you know, good vibes only, it's really, again, pretty reductive. So we want to say it's normal and valid, again, to feel this way, to be struggling, to have good moments and bad moments. You know, there's a full spectrum of our humanity and our feelings, and to look at it more as like a spectrum instead of like good and bad can be really helpful.
I have to say, Dr. Gallagher, as I think conversations about mental health become more commonplace, this type of conversation actually resonates across generations. Because I come from a generation where, you know, my family was like, deal with it, you'll be fine. And I've seen that dynamic change with my sister, because she used to say that to her children, like, you'll be fine. You know, and then when she changed the narrative, suddenly her relationship with her children became more meaningful. But I wonder if you could tell us what the consequences of continued toxic positivity can impact our relationships.
Yeah, I think it can impact your relationships, because you're not going to keep wanting to share when you're struggling. If someone's always saying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're not really depressed, this is just a phase, you'll get through it. And again, they think that they're giving you a pep talk, but it actually can make you feel worse in the end. So I think to develop closeness and intimacy, it's about having those tough conversations and realizing they're not going to last forever. You're also going to have happy moments in the long run. But if you can't engage with some of the tougher moments and build that emotional intimacy and connection and really be there with each other in some of the darker moments, you're going to miss out on that connection. And I think it's looking at people and our emotions as both and rather than either or. We can be in one moment really sad and in the next moment really expectant. Or a change can bring really great things, and it can also bring loss. And so looking at ourselves a little more complex ways can be really helpful.
Yeah, and to go off of Marshall's point, I try to talk to my kids in that way, saying, you know, it's okay to feel sad, I understand. And now they're more willing to speak with me about what they're feeling than they are with their dad who says, get over it.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
You know, and we're talking about like how others can really inflict that on you. But from my experience, it's almost self-sabotage, right? Because you're inflicting it on yourself at times. Because if something's happening to you and you don't want to talk to other people to hear those phrases, you then do what you would expect to hear from somebody else. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to suppress this, move on to do the next thing, which then kind of builds up the anxiety and stress, at least for me personally, right? So we can self-sabotage in terms of toxic positivity within ourselves.
Oh, yeah. I think the biggest finger we should be pointing is the one at ourselves, because, you know, we'll share with friends and then immediately be like, oh, I'll get over it, or I'm just having a bad moment, or it's fine. And we use all these disclaimers and we try to get away from those feelings. We don't want to burden our loved ones. And I actually do think, exactly to your point, we're the worst, you know, at this, where we don't allow ourselves to to even share that we're struggling. Oh, I'm having like a really tough day, full stop. I don't need to make it right, or I'm going to get over it in a day, or it's fine, everything will work out. We really have to also show that vulnerability to others. And that's how we kind of build this cascade of vulnerability where we can, again, grow that intimacy and connection, and then it can keep going, and then we'll feel better in the long run.
But how do we do that then? How do we do that exactly to make sure that our responses come from this place of mindfulness and empathy, not just for others, but ourselves?
I think it's about authenticity, feeling, empathy is really about trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And like, that does sound really tough, or, that would be really frustrating. Or even, again, to offer up when you're having a tough day, to reach out to your loved ones and being like, oh man, I'm just in like a really bad mood today, or I'm feeling really stressed about the holidays. So it goes both ways. Like, we have to share when we're struggling with loved ones. And then also really just trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes can be so powerful, and see what it feels like for them. And don't worry about hurting people by engaging with their negative feelings. That's not how people get hurt. That's how few people feel understood and, less alone.
This is great advice, and just the beginning of a conversation that I encourage all of us to have with our friends and our loved ones. Dr. Gallagher, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks again for having me.